Captain Deho stood on the bridge of his ship, the Iron Resolve. The metal walls around him showed the marks of many battles, burn marks from laser hits, dents from impacts, patches welded over holes. His ship was old and scarred, just like him. The communication officer, a young woman named Sora, looked up from her station. Her face was pale. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal. It's coming from the Kalari Federation." Deho walked over to her station. The Kalari were peaceful people. They lived on floating cities made of crystal. They could speak with their minds instead of words. They had never hurt anyone. 3 years ago, when the corporate wars had destroyed New Sol, the Kalari had opened their worlds to human refugees. They had fed human children and given them homes when no one else would help. "Put it on the main screen," Deho said. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge go quiet. A tall, thin being with blue skin that glowed like starlight stood before them. This was a Kalari, but this one looked afraid. Behind the Kalari, Deho could see fires burning. Crystal buildings were falling apart. Black smoke filled the air. "This is High Crystal Seer Nari of the Kalari Federation," the being said. Her voice shook. "We are under attack by the Vorthak hegemony. They have already taken 12 of our worlds. Our people are being consumed. Our children." Her voice broke. "Please, anyone who receives this message, we need help. We are dying." The signal cut out. The bridge was silent. Deho knew about the Vorthak. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were not really alive, but they were not machines either. They were something in between. A hive mind that spread from world to world like a disease. They would take over people's bodies and make them into parts of their collective. Once the Vorthak came to your world, you stopped being yourself forever. "Sir," said Lieutenant Minho from the weapons station. "The Vorthak have been moving through that sector for months. No one has tried to stop them." "What about the Galactic Council?" asked Sora. Deho laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Council? They'll spend weeks talking about it. They'll form committees. They'll send diplomatic messages. By the time they decide what to do, the Kalari will all be dead." He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kalari were fighting for their lives. Somewhere out there, children who had once played in crystal gardens were screaming as monsters took their parents away. The communication system buzzed again. This time it was a different signal. Admiral Sung Min appeared on the screen. His face was hard and lined with scars. Behind him, Deho could see the command center of the human fleet. "All ships," Admiral Sung Min said. "You've all seen the Kalari message. Command wants to know our response." Other ship captains appeared on smaller screens around the main display. Captain Jinei of the stealth ship Silent Blade. Captain Yujin of the destroyer Guangzhou's Vengeance. Captain So Young of the missile cruiser Incheon's Pride. All of them looked tired. All of them had fought in too many wars. "Admiral," said Captain Jinei, "with respect, this isn't our fight. The Kalari are outside human space. We have our own problems, do we?" Admiral Seung-min asked. "Because I remember when New Sol was burning. I remember when the corporate syndicate was hunting our people through the outer colonies. And I remember who gave us shelter when the rest of the galaxy turned their backs on us." Captain Yu-jin spoke up. "The Kalari saved my daughter when Proxima fell. They took her in when I thought she was dead. They kept her alive." Deho thought about that time. The corporate wars had been brutal. Human colonies had been attacked by their own companies. Families had been torn apart. Children had been left alone on dead worlds. And when the human government had asked other species for help, they had all said no. Too dangerous. Too expensive. Not their problem. Only the Kalari had said yes. They had sent their crystal ships to evacuate human civilians. They had opened their worlds to refugees. They had shared their food and their homes with strangers who had nothing to give back. "The Council won't help them," Admiral Seung-min continued. "The Manthari will say it's not honorable to fight an enemy they can't face in single combat. The Zyterans will say their technology isn't ready. The Zephyraites will say it's bad for trade. They'll all have reasons why they can't help." Captain So Young's image flickered as she spoke. "So what are you saying, Admiral?" Admiral Seung-min was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm saying that we've been fighting wars for 300 years. We've fought pirates and corporations and rebels and machines. We've fought when we were outnumbered. We've fought when we were outgunned. We've fought when everyone said we couldn't win." He paused. "And we're still here." Deho felt something stirring in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had during the android uprising. The same feeling from the Martian Independence War. It was the feeling that came when someone needed help and no one else would give it. The Vorthak think they can take whatever they want, Admiral Sung Min said. They think no one will stop them because no one has stopped them before. Maybe it's time someone taught them differently. The communication channel was quiet. Each captain was thinking. Each crew was remembering what the Kalari had done for them. Finally, Captain Yu Jin spoke. My ship is ready, Admiral. Mine too, said Captain Jin A. Silent Blade standing by, said Captain So Young. One by one, every human ship in the sector reported ready. Cargo ships that had been turned into fighters. Mining vessels with weapons welded to their sides. Passenger ships that now carried Marines instead of tourists. Daeho looked around his own bridge. His crew was waiting for his decision. These people had followed him through the corporate wars. They had stayed with him when other officers had given up. They trusted him. Iron Resolve is ready, Admiral, Daeho said. Admiral Sung Min nodded. Then let's go remind the galaxy why humans don't abandon their friends. The human fleet began to move. Not the biggest fleet in the galaxy, not the most advanced, but every ship in it was crewed by people who had learned a hard lesson over 3 centuries of war. Sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become something the enemy fears. The Kalari had saved human children once. Now it was time for humans to return that favor. The stars waited ahead, cold and distant. Somewhere among them, an ancient evil was spreading its darkness. And somewhere among them, the only species crazy enough to fight it was coming to meet it. The Vorthak had never faced humans before. They were about to learn why that was their mistake. The Vorthak bioships hung around the planet Luminar like giant insects around a dying animal. Each ship was alive in its own horrible way. They breathed. They pulsed. Their hulls were made of bone and flesh instead of metal. Thousands of them filled the space around the last Kalari world. Commander Hyunwoo of the Kalari Defense Fleet watched them through his crystal viewport. His ship, the Starlight Dream, was one of only 12 Kalari vessels left. The others had been destroyed or captured in the fighting. Soon his people would all be gone. The largest Vorthak ship was the size of a small moon. This was Hive Nexus Prime, the brain of the entire Vorthak fleet. From this ship, the Hive Mind controlled millions of drones across 17 star systems. It was covered in weapons that looked like giant teeth and claws. Commander, said his weapons officer, a young Kalari named Dalho, the Vorthak are moving into final attack position. We estimate 30 minutes before they begin the assault on the surface. Yunwoo closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. All Kalari could speak without words, but commanders could feel the thoughts of their entire fleet. What he felt now was fear. His people knew they were going to die. On the planet below, in the crystal cities that floated above the clouds, millions of Kalari waited. Families held each other. Children asked their parents why the bad ships had come. Parents had no answers to give. The Galactic Council had sent messages. Pretty words about diplomatic solutions and peaceful negotiations. But no ships, no help, no hope. Yunwoo opened his eyes and was about to give the order to make their last stand when his sensor officer shouted in surprise, "Commander, new contacts coming out of hyperspace." The space around Luminar suddenly filled with flashes of light. Ships appeared everywhere. Not the smooth, elegant vessels of the great galactic powers. These ships looked like they had been built in shipyards and rebuilt in battle. They were covered in armor patches and weapon mounts that didn't match their original designs. "By the crystal light," whispered Dalho. "How many are there?" Hyunwoo stared at his screens. The numbers kept climbing. 50 ships, 100, 500, 1,000. More ships than he had ever seen in one place. "Commander," said his communication officer, "we're receiving a message. It's from the humans." The main screen flickered to life. A human appeared on it. He was older than most humans Hyunwoo had met. His face was marked with scars and his eyes looked tired. Behind him, Hyunwoo could see a ship's bridge that was all function and no beauty. Pipes and cables ran everywhere. Screens showed weapon readouts and damage reports. "This is Admiral Sung Min of the human fleet," the man said. "Commander Hyunwoo, I presume?" "Admiral," Hyunwoo said, trying to keep the hope out of his voice. "We didn't expect—" That is, the council said no one was coming. Admiral Sung Min's expression didn't change. The council was right. No one is coming. Just us. More human ships kept arriving. Hyunwoo saw converted cargo vessels with missile launchers welded to their sides. Old mining ships that now bristled with guns. even civilian transports that had been turned into makeshift warships. "Admiral," Hyunwoo said, "the Vorthak have over 3,000 bioships. Our scans show your vessels are, forgive me, but they appear to be civilian conversions. Are you sure you can—" "Commander," Admiral Sung-min interrupted, "let me tell you something about human ships. They're not pretty, they're not advanced, but they're built by people who have been fighting for their lives for 300 years. Every ship in this fleet has seen battle. Every crew knows what it means to be outnumbered. On the human ships, crews were preparing for battle. Captain Daeho walked through the Iron Resolve, checking on his people. In the engine room, Engineer Hyo-jin was running final checks on systems that had been rebuilt so many times they barely resembled their original designs. "Hyo-jin," Daeho said, "how are we looking?" The young woman wiped grease from her hands. "The engines are holding together with prayer and spare parts, Captain. But they'll do what we need them to do." In another part of the ship, the artificial intelligence Area 7 was running combat simulations. Area 7 was different from other ship AIs. Her personality matrix was based on a human child who had died during the Proxima attack. Her voice sounded young and innocent, but her tactical mind was sharper than any military computer. "Captain Daeho," Area 7 said through the ship's speakers, "I have completed analysis of the Vorthak fleet composition. Their bioships show interesting weaknesses." "What kind of weaknesses?" Daeho asked. "They rely on coordinated hive mind responses. If we can disrupt their communication network, individual ships will become confused and vulnerable." Across the human fleet, similar conversations were happening. Captain Jin A of the Silent Blade was reviewing stealth approach routes. Captain Yu Jin of the Gwangju's Vengeance was checking her ship's suicide charges, weapons of last resort that could take an enemy ship down even if her own vessel was destroyed. The Vorthak noticed the human arrival, but they were not concerned. Their bioships began to turn toward the human fleet, moving like predators sensing new prey. Hive Nexus Prime pulsed with alien thoughts as it analyzed the newcomers. The humans were weak. Their ships were old and crude. Their technology was primitive compared to Vorthak bioengineering. The hive mind calculated that the humans would be consumed within hours. This calculation was their first mistake. Admiral Sung-min opened a communication channel to all human ships. "All vessels, this is Fleet Command. You know why we're here. The Kalari saved our people when no one else would. Today we return that favor." He paused, looking at the massive enemy fleet that surrounded them. "The Vorthak think they can take whatever they want because no one has ever made them pay for it. Today we send them a bill." Captain Daeho smiled as he listened to the Admiral's words. Around him, his crew was taking their battle stations. These weren't the clean, professional soldiers of other galactic powers. These were miners and traders and refugees who had learned to fight because the universe had given them no choice. "All ships," Admiral Seung-min continued, "remember what we learned in the corporate wars. Remember what we learned fighting the androids. Remember what we learned when everyone else abandoned us. We don't fight fair. We don't fight clean. We fight to win." The human fleet began to spread out, taking formations that no military academy would recognize. Each ship moved independently, following patterns that seemed random, but made sense to crews who had learned to fight against impossible odds. Commander Hyun-woo watched in amazement as the humans positioned themselves. Their tactics were unlike anything he had studied. They didn't form neat battle lines or maintain proper distances. Instead, they moved like a pack of wild animals, each ship supporting the others but ready to act alone if needed. "Commander," said Dalho, "what are they doing?" Hyunwoo was beginning to understand. They're not fighting like a fleet. They're fighting like survivors. The Vorthak began their attack, confident in their overwhelming numbers. Bioships launched living missiles that sought their targets like bloodhounds. Weapon appendages that looked like giant claws reached out to grab and crush enemy vessels. But when the weapons reached the space where the human ships had been, they found nothing. The humans had scattered like leaves in a storm, each ship moving in patterns that seemed impossible to predict. And then the humans began to fight back. Captain Daeho spoke calmly into his communicator. "All ships, execute Pattern 7. To the Vorthak, it looked like chaos. Human ships darted between biovessels, firing weapons and then disappearing before return fire could reach them. They didn't fight like civilized species, trying to minimize casualties and preserve their ships. They fought like people who had nothing left to lose. The battle for Luminar had begun. And for the first time in their 1,000-year expansion, the Vorthak faced an enemy that had learned to be more merciless than they were. The battle was not going as the Vorthak had expected. Their bioships were larger and stronger than the human vessels, but the humans fought like nothing the hive mind had ever encountered. They used tactics that seemed insane, weapons that violated galactic treaties, and strategies that no civilized species would consider. Captain Deho watched his screens as the Iron Resolve weaved between Vorthak bioships like a small fish swimming through a school of sharks. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had faced death many times before. Aria 7, he said to his ship's artificial intelligence. Begin psychological warfare protocol. Confirmed. Captain, replied the AI in her young voice. Broadcasting now. Across all communication frequencies, the human fleet began transmitting something that made even hardened soldiers uncomfortable. These were recordings from previous Vorthak attacks. The screams of people being absorbed into the hive mind, the last words of parents watching their children be taken, the sounds of entire civilizations dying, but the humans didn't just play these recordings. They amplified them and broadcast them directly into the bioship's neural networks. For creatures that shared a collective consciousness, the mental assault was devastating. Hive Nexus Prime shuddered as thousands of death cries flooded its awareness. The great bioship had absorbed many species over the centuries, but it had never been forced to experience their final moments all at once. For the first time in its existence, the hive mind felt something like pain. Target the communication nodes, ordered Captain Jinne from her stealth ship, Silent Blade. Her vessel had crept close to a cluster of bioships while they were distracted by the psychological attack. Hit them hard and fast. The Silent Blade fired missiles at point-blank range into the organic communication structures that connected the bioships to each other. Without these links, individual Vorthak vessels began to act confused and disorganized. Captain Yujin saw her opportunity. The Guangzhou's vengeance accelerated toward a group of separated bioships, its weapons blazing. For Proxima, she shouted as her ship's guns tore into alien flesh. Yujin's ship had been at Proxima when the corporate syndicate had poisoned the atmosphere to kill the colonists. She had watched her own daughter's school burn while corporate soldiers prevented rescue ships from landing. The Vorthak reminded her of those corporate killers, beings who consumed others without caring about the cost. But while the human captains fought their individual battles, Admiral Sungmin was coordinating something larger. Deep in the human fleet, science ships were preparing weapons that the galaxy had banned for good reason. Dr. Yunji worked frantically in her laboratory. Aboard the research vessel Incheon's Pride, she was a xenobiologist who had studied alien life forms for 20 years. Now she was using that knowledge to find ways to kill them. Admiral, she reported over the communication system, I found it. The Vorthak hive mind uses quantum entanglement to maintain connection across vast distances. If we can create a feedback loop in their neural network, we can turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Admiral Sungmin listened to her explanation. The plan was horrific. It would require broadcasting a signal that would cause every Vorthak in the galaxy to experience simultaneous neural collapse. It was essentially torture on a species-wide scale. Doctor, he said quietly, are you certain this will work? Yes, Admiral. But the signal needs to be transmitted from inside their primary communication hub. That means someone has to get close enough to Hive Nexus Prime to plant the transmitter manually, the Admiral finished. And they probably won't survive the mission. While they spoke, other human ships were employing tactics that made the watching galaxy recoil in horror. Major Taehyun's Marines had boarded damaged bioships and were using chemical weapons to clear out Vorthak drones. The chemicals were banned by 7 different galactic conventions because they caused slow, agonizing death. Command, this is Major Taehyun, he reported as his soldiers moved through the organic corridors of a bioship. We're encountering Vorthak breeding chambers. Request permission to use Protocol Orange. Protocol Orange was a weapon that attacked the Vorthak reproductive system. It would kill not just the adult drones but also the young ones still growing in their organic pods. By any civilized standard, it was equivalent to bombing schools and hospitals. Admiral Sungmin closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and gave the order that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Permission granted. All ships, you are authorized to target non-combatant facilities. Captain So Young received the transmission aboard her missile cruiser. Her targeting officer, a young man named Jae-wook, looked at her with shock. "Captain, those coordinates, they're showing nursery chambers. There are Vorthak young in there." "I know," So-young said quietly. She thought about her own children, safe on a human colony far from this battle. Then she thought about the Kalari children who were dying on the planet below. "Fire all missiles." The galaxy watched in horror as human weapons struck targets that other species would never consider attacking. News broadcasts across civilized space showed footage of the battle, and commentators struggled to find words for what they were seeing. "This is War Speaker Kethvar of the Menthari High Command," announced a proud alien warrior on the Galactic News Network. "What the humans are doing violates every principle of honorable warfare. They have become the very evil they claim to fight." But the humans didn't stop. They couldn't afford to stop. Commander Hyunwoo watched from his Kalari ship as the human fleet systematically dismantled the Vorthak force. He felt sick at some of the tactics he was witnessing, but he also felt something else: hope. For the first time since the attack began, his people might actually survive. "Commander," said Dalho, "the human attack is working. The Vorthak fleet is beginning to break apart." It was true. Without their hive mind coordination, individual bioships were becoming easy targets for the human fleet. But Hive Nexus Prime still floated at the center of the battle, its massive form pulsing with malevolent intelligence. Dr. Yunji had finished her neural disruptor device. It was a small thing, no bigger than a briefcase, but it contained the power to destroy an entire species. All they needed was someone willing to deliver it. "I'll do it," said Captain Yujin immediately when Admiral Sung Min explained the mission. "My ship is already damaged. We won't make it out of this battle anyway." Her crew had overheard the conversation. One by one, they came to the bridge to volunteer. These were people who had lost everything in the corporate wars. They had joined Yujin's crew because they had nowhere else to go, and nothing left to lose. "Captain," said her engineer, a grizzled veteran named Dong-Su, "we've been looking for a good death ever since Proxima. This seems like the right one." Admiral Sung Min felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He was about to order good people to die for a victory that would stain their souls forever. But the alternative was letting the Kalari be exterminated while the galaxy watched and did nothing. "Very well," he said. "Captain Yujin, prepare for your final mission." The Gwangju's vengeance turned toward Hive Nexus Prime, its engines straining to build up enough speed for what was essentially a suicide run. Behind it, the rest of the human fleet continued their merciless assault on the remaining bioships. As Yujin's ship accelerated toward certain death, she opened a communication channel to all human vessels. "Tell them back home," she said. "Tell them we didn't abandon our friends." The Vorthak had faced many species in their 1,000-year expansion across the galaxy. They had absorbed the proud Menthari, the advanced Zyterans, and dozens of other civilizations. But they had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for people who weren't even their own species. The humans were about to teach them what that kind of loyalty could accomplish. The Gwangju's vengeance flew toward Hive Nexus Prime like a bullet aimed at the heart of the enemy fleet. Captain Yujin sat in her command chair, watching the massive bioship grow larger on her screen. Behind her, her crew worked at their stations with calm determination. They all knew they were about to die. "Distance to target?" Yujin asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing, reported her navigation officer, Lieutenant Bo-Ram. "The bioship is launching interceptors." Yujin could see them on her screen, smaller Vorthak vessels that looked like flying insects. They were fast and deadly, designed to destroy ships before they could reach the main hive. But Yujin's crew had been planning for this moment. "All power to forward shields," she ordered, "and activate the ramming configuration." The Gwangju's vengeance had been modified for this mission. Extra armor plating covered its front section, and the ship's internal structure had been reinforced with steel beams. It was no longer a warship. It was a guided missile with a human crew. Dr. Yunji's neural disruptor sat in a specially protected compartment near the ship's core. The device was small, but it contained the knowledge needed to destroy the Vorthak hive mind forever. All they had to do was get it close enough to Hive Nexus Prime's central nervous system. "Captain," said Engineer Dong-Su from the engine room, "we're taking heavy fire. Hull integrity at 60% and falling." "Keep us moving," Yujin replied. "We only need to last another minute." Around the dying ship, the rest of the human fleet was finishing its work. The Vorthak bioships that weren't already destroyed were fleeing in all directions, their hive mind connection weakened by the psychological warfare and targeted attacks. Captain Deho watched Yujin's sacrifice from the bridge of the Iron Resolve. He wanted to help, but his orders were clear. Protect the Kalari planet and let the Guangzhou's vengeance complete its mission alone. Captain, said his weapons officer, Lieutenant Minho, should we provide covering fire? No, Deho said quietly. She needs to do this herself. On the planet below, High Crystal Seer Nari felt the battle raging above through her telepathic abilities. She could sense the human emotions, their anger, their determination, and their willingness to die for people they barely knew. It was overwhelming. The Guangzhou's vengeance broke through the last line of interceptors. Yujin could see the surface of Hive Nexus Prime now, a writhing mass of organic material that pulsed with alien thoughts. Weapon ports opened like mouths to devour her ship. This is Captain Yujin to all human vessels, she said into her communicator. Tell the galaxy what we did here. Tell them why we did it. Her ship struck Hive Nexus Prime with the force of a meteor. The armored prow punched through the bioship's outer layers and deep into its central nervous system. Alarm screamed as the Guangzhou's vengeance buried itself in alien flesh like a spear in a giant's heart. Dr. Yunji's neural disruptor activated automatically upon impact. The device began broadcasting its signal directly into the Vorthak hive mind's primary node. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across 17 star systems, every Vorthak drone suddenly screamed in unison. The neural feedback loop created by the disruptor turned their shared consciousness into a weapon against itself. Bioships convulsed as their crews collapsed. Orbital stations went dark as their operators lost control. Admiral Sung Min watched the readings from his command ship. All stop, he ordered. Let the disruptor do its work. But the humans didn't just watch. While the Vorthak writhed in agony, human ships moved to finish what they had started. This wasn't just about stopping one attack. It was about making sure the Vorthak could never threaten anyone again. General Kang Dae led ground forces onto the Vorthak bioships that had crashed on nearby moons. His soldiers moved through the organic corridors with weapons that burned everything they touched. Their job was to make sure no Vorthak spores survived to rebuild the hive. Burn it all, Kang Dae ordered his troops. Every breeding chamber, every storage pod, every piece of organic matter. Nothing gets left alive. Colonel Insu commanded demolition teams that used fusion charges to collapse entire sections of bioships. The charges were powerful enough to glass the organic matter, ensuring that it could never regrow. Commander Heiwan coordinated orbital bombardments that turned Vorthak-controlled worlds into burning wastelands. Her ships fired weapons that would poison the ground for centuries, making it impossible for any form of Vorthak life to return. The galaxy watched in horror as the humans conducted what could only be called genocide. News broadcasts showed footage of human soldiers using flamethrowers to burn Vorthak young, orbital bombardments that destroyed entire continents, chemical weapons that would make worlds uninhabitable for generations. War speaker Kethvar of the Menthari broadcast his outrage across all civilized channels. This is madness, he declared. The humans have become monsters. They are committing genocide against an entire species. Admiral Seung Min received the transmission on his command ship. He was tired. His fleet had lost 37 ships and over 8,000 crew members. Good people had died to save strangers, and now the galaxy was calling them monsters for it. He opened a communication channel that would reach every civilized world. This is Admiral Seung Min of the human fleet, he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed the weight of what he had done. You call us monsters? You want to talk about evil? Evil is watching peaceful people die while you debate in committees. Evil is choosing your comfort over someone else's survival. Evil is abandoning your allies when they need you most. He paused, looking directly into the camera. We've been fighting for 300 years. We've learned that sometimes the only way to protect what's good in the universe is to become something terrible. You may call us monsters, but at least we're monsters who save our friends. The communication ended. Around the galaxy, billions of beings watched the aftermath of the battle. The Vorthak hegemony was gone. 17 star systems lay in radioactive silence. An entire species had been wiped from existence in a single day. High Crystal Seer Nari felt the moment when the last Vorthak died. Through her telepathic abilities, she experienced the final thoughts of beings that had once consumed entire civilizations. Their death cries echoed across space like a funeral song for a species that had lived for 1,000 years. But she also felt something else. She felt the human emotions, the guilt, the pain, the knowledge that they had done something terrible for the right reasons. These beings had sacrificed not just their lives but their souls to save her people. Commander Hyunwoo brought his ship alongside the Iron Resolve. Through the communication system, he spoke to Captain Dae-ho.
Captain, on behalf of all Kalari, I thank you.
You saved us when no one else would. Dae-ho looked tired. Don't thank us yet, Commander. Look at what we had to become to save you. Look at what we had to do. The Kalari commander was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Captain, my people believe that sometimes the light can only survive if someone is willing to stand in the darkness. Today you stood in the darkness for us. The human fleet began to withdraw from Kalari space. They had accomplished their mission, but the cost had been higher than anyone had imagined. They had saved an entire species, but they had also proven that civilized warfare was a luxury they couldn't afford. As the ships turned toward human space, Admiral Sung-min received reports from across the galaxy. The civilized species were calling for humanity to be expelled from galactic society. They demanded trials for war crimes. They wanted reparations for the excessive use of force. The Admiral looked at these reports and felt nothing but contempt. Where had these civilized species been when the Kalari were dying? Where had their principles been when genocide was actually happening? Humanity was alone again. But that was nothing new. They had always been alone when it mattered most. 6 months after the Battle of Luminar, the Galactic Council met in emergency session. The Great Assembly Hall was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all of them angry and afraid. They had called this meeting to decide what to do about the humans. Ambassador Jong-ho sat alone at the human delegation table. He was a tired man with gray hair and scars on his hands from the corporate wars. Around him, alien diplomats whispered and pointed. Some looked at him with disgust, others with fear. Chancellor Vexthara of the Zitaran Empire stood to address the assembly. Her crystalline form sparkled under the chamber's lights as she spoke. Fellow beings, we are here to discuss the actions of the human species at Luminar. What they did there violated every principle of civilized warfare. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Zitarans had been developing new weapons for 300 years, but they had never used anything as brutal as what the humans had deployed. War Speaker Kethavar of the Manthari rose next. His proud warrior race had fought countless battles across the galaxy, but always with honor. The humans targeted non-combatants, he declared. They used chemical weapons. They committed genocide against an entire species. This cannot be allowed to stand. More voices joined in. The Zephyrite trade guilds demanded reparations for the economic disruption caused by the battle. The Corvani Collective wanted humanity expelled from galactic civilization entirely. Species after species stood to condemn the humans for their actions. Ambassador Jong-ho listened to it all in silence. He thought about the reports he had received that morning. Captain Dae-ho had committed suicide 3 weeks ago, unable to live with what he had done to save the Kalari. Dr. Unji was in a medical facility, her mind broken by the knowledge that she had created a weapon of genocide. Admiral Sung-min had resigned his commission and now lived alone on a dead colony world. Finally, the chamber fell quiet. All eyes turned to the human ambassador. He stood slowly, his old bones protesting the movement. You want to know about war crimes? He said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. Let me tell you about war crimes. War crimes are watching children die while you debate in committees. War crimes are abandoning your allies when they need you most. War crimes are having the power to help and choosing not to use it. He gestured to the empty seats where Kalari representatives should have been sitting.
6 months ago, a peaceful species sent out a cry for help.
They were facing extinction at the hands of monsters that would consume their children and turn them into weapons. Where were your noble Manthari warriors then? Where were your advanced Zitaran fleets? Where were your vast Zephyrite merchant marines? The silence in the chamber was complete. I'll tell you where you were, Jong-ho continued. You were here, in this very chamber, forming committees and drafting resolutions and sending diplomatic messages to creatures that had no interest in diplomacy. You were protecting your precious principles while children died. Chancellor Vexithara started to speak. But Jung-ho cut her off. You asked us once why humanity never sought to join your grand alliances. You said we were too violent, too unstable, too quick to choose war over diplomacy. You were right about all of that. We are violent. We are unstable. We do choose war when other options fail. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegation. But when the time came, when innocent people needed salvation, who answered their call? Not your honorable warriors. Not your advanced civilizations. Not your wealthy merchants, just us. The violent, unstable humans that you deemed too savage for your enlightened company. War Speaker Cathvar rose to his feet. The methods you used were effective, Jung-ho interrupted. The methods we used were effective. The Kalari are alive. Their children are playing in crystal gardens instead of being absorbed into a hive mind. That happened because we were willing to become something terrible to protect something good. In the gallery above the main floor, observers from across the galaxy watched the exchange. Many of them were horrified by what the humans had done at Luminar. But some of them were thinking about their own worlds, their own families, and wondering what they would want someone to do if monsters came for them. Admiral Dongmin, who had taken command of the human fleet after Admiral Sungmin's resignation, appeared on a communication screen behind Ambassador Jung-ho. His face was hard and showed no emotion. Honored delegates, Admiral Dongmin said, I have been authorized to deliver humanity's official response to these proceedings. The chamber waited. Humanity is withdrawing from galactic affairs, he announced. We will honor our existing treaties with the Kalari Federation, the only species that has earned our protection through shared sacrifice. But for the rest of the galaxy, our message is simple. Next time you face extinction, call someone else. Shocked voices erupted throughout the chamber. Representatives demanded explanations, threatened economic sanctions, called for military action against human space. Ambassador Jung-ho raised his hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, he spoke again. You don't understand, do you? You think you've gained peace by rejecting our violent ways. What you've actually done is lost the only guardian willing to pay the price for your protection. He activated a holographic display that showed star charts of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where ancient threats still slumbered. Unknown regions where other species like the Vorthak might be waiting. The Vorthak were not the only evil in this galaxy, Jung-ho said. They were just the first to test your resolve. Out there in the dark between stars, other horrors are watching. They're learning that the civilized species of this galaxy will debate while their victims die. They're learning that no one will stop them as long as they're patient enough. He pointed to the red zones on the map. When they come, and they will come, you'll face them with committee meetings and diplomatic protocols. You'll send strong letters and form investigative commissions, and you'll die with your principles intact. The ambassador began walking toward the exit. Humanity will face them with nuclear fire and the cold mathematics of necessary atrocity. Because someone has to. Because someone always has to. As he reached the door, he turned back one last time. The Kalari understand this now. They're adapting their crystal technology for war. They've learned what you refuse to accept. In a universe where evil exists, good must be willing to become terrible to survive. The chamber erupted in chaos as Ambassador Jung-ho left. Some delegates called for his arrest. Others demanded military action against human space. A few sat quietly, thinking about what he had said. High Crystal Seer Nari watched the proceedings from the Kalari observation booth. Her people had been given special permission to attend, even though they were not full members of the council. She felt the emotions in the chamber through her telepathic abilities. Anger, fear, self-righteousness, and underneath it all, a growing dread. That evening, as the council continued to debate, Nari met with Ambassador Jung-ho in his quarters. The human looked older than when she had first met him. Ambassador, she said, my people want you to know that we will never forget what humanity sacrificed for us. Jung-ho poured himself a drink from a bottle of human alcohol. The galaxy will forget, he said. They'll rewrite the history to make themselves look better. In 50 years, they'll teach their children that the Vorthak were defeated by a coalition of civilized species working together. Perhaps, Nari agreed, but the Kalari will remember the truth, and we will prepare for the next time. 3 days later, the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, returning to their own territory. They left behind monitoring stations and automated defense platforms around Kalari space, but no crewed vessels. Humanity had kept its word. They would honor their treaty with the Kalari, but they were done fighting for a galaxy that despised them for their methods. The Galactic Council passed resolution after resolution condemning human actions. They established new laws against the tactics humanity had used. They created committees to ensure that such barbaric methods would never be employed again. But in the dark spaces between stars, ancient evils stirred. They had watched the Battle of Luminar with interest. They had seen how the galaxy's civilized species responded to true threat. And they began to plan. The Vorthak had been defeated, but they had also served as teachers. They had shown other predators that the galaxy was full of prey, too civilized to defend itself effectively, too bound by principles to do what was necessary for survival. There was only one species that had proven willing to embrace necessary evil. Only one group that understood that sometimes the darkness had to be fought with darkness. The galaxy had rejected that guardian. Now it would face the consequences of that choice. In human space, Admiral Dong Min reviewed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. New threats were emerging. Ancient enemies were awakening. And when they came, they would find a galaxy defended by committees and diplomats instead of warriors willing to do whatever it took to win. The humans would be ready. They always were. They would watch from the edges of known space. And when the civilized galaxy finally learned the price of their principles, perhaps some of them would understand why humanity had chosen a different path. Until then, the humans would wait and prepare.